Going on, all you constant listeners out there in the multiverse? You are listening and viewing the Earth-16 Comics Wire podcast. I am your host, Brian from Earth-16, and in this segment, I'm going to be chatting with Grant Lankard. I'm the creator of the Beowulf comic series. You don't want to miss this. Welcome back to the Earth-16 Comics Wire podcast. I hope that all of you are doing very awesome. For those of you watching the YouTube video version of this podcast, if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button and also the subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. And also hit the bell icon to receive the newest content from the Earth-16 Comics Wire podcast. For those of you who are listening, you can find me on the most podcast platforms, including Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And please shoot me a comment or a review. I welcome any kind of comment as long as you keep it PG, of course. So now, before we get into the podcast, I have an exciting announcement to make. I'm going to be doing several reviews for Mad Cave Studios and their comic books. So in the coming weeks, I'll be posting articles and also doing review videos on the comics coming from Mad Cave. It's really exciting for me, and I'm really excited. Yeah, I'm really excited to be doing all this. So be on the lookout for that. And also, I'm going to have several more guests on this podcast, including Ronnie Lescafau, the creator of Heavens Decoded, and also which is published by Cypher Comics, which should be around the end of February this month or the first week of March. In addition, I'll also have Pat Murphy back on the Comics Wire around the same time. As the weeks roll by, I'll be announcing more guests coming in the coming weeks, so be on the lookout for that, folks. So having said that, I will be speaking with, in this segment, I'm going to be speaking with Grant Lankard on his comic Beowulf, which is currently being funded on Kickstarter. For those of you who are viewing the YouTube page, I'm going to have the link to the Kickstarter on the description, so that way you can click on it and check out the Kickstarter. And for those of you who are listening, you can simply Google Beowulf comic Grant Lankard. That's Beowulf as in Beowulf. Comic, and then Grant, and Lankard is spelled Lankard. So just Google that, and the link should be able to pop up, and you can check out the link. It looks really awesome. And I recommend that you go to the Kickstarter page and check it out. Grant and I had a really good conversation about the comic and a whole bunch of other stuff. So after the break, I'll be chatting with Grant Lankard about the comic Beowulf on Kickstarter. Don't go anywhere, folks. How you been, man?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Doing very good. So we have a lot to talk about today. I mean, with your Kickstarter Beowulf, I've read the introduction comic, and it looks really exciting, man. I mean, it's like a hero's journey, I feel.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of struggles, both internal and external.
Yeah.
I think people are gonna like it.
Oh yeah, I mean, totally. And when you were creating this comic, did you have that in mind, like the hero's journey as told by Joseph Campbell?
No, I didn't think about that. So it wasn't until later. So I came up with this idea when I was a kid.
Oh wow.
Well, I came up with the idea of Beowulf. Obviously, it's changed a lot. But the first thing that kind of interested me about it was, I remember as a kid, my parents had these, like, hardbound books that were all about, like, fairy tales, like, different myths, legends. And the first thing that stood out to me about Beowulf was I was like, wow, this sounds like a comic book. Like, this literally sounds like every superhero I've ever, like, read about. And, you know, it wouldn't be until I was older that, yeah, I put all those other things together. Like, when you really think about it, there's really not that big of a difference between, like, Superman and, like, Hercules.
Oh, no.
You know? I mean, and obviously that's not even counting all of, the superheroes like Wonder Woman and Thor, who are directly taken from mythology. So, yeah, so that's kind of how the idea kind of started. And then, yeah, like, as you were saying, like, as I got older, I started thinking about it more. Like, yeah, stuff like the call to action, stuff that, Joseph Campbell wrote about started seeping its way into the story. Did you want me to elaborate some more?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, well, let's see. So so basically some, as you were, coming up with this idea, like other ideas start to kind of like, build on each other in terms of like mythology and heroes. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. And I mean, and so, guys like Grant Morrison has written a lot about how various, mythology, really when you get right down to it, superheroes are kind of like the modern equivalent of mythology.
Yep, they are the modern day mythology, absolutely. And and especially superheroes for me, it's mythology. It's also in a sense a western. I like to call it the new western. I mean, it's really, the whole superhero genre has enveloped in every medium you can think of. Not just comic books, the movies, novels,
Exactly.
You name it. I mean, they're basically almost like the new Greek gods in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that that's what, fascinates me about superheroes. The fact that, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I can be fairly certain that, 100 years or even 1,000 years from now, people are still going to be talking about Superman, Wonder Woman, these guys. And I think, yeah, it takes on kind of a life of its own, the same way those myths did. In the same way that, the mythology of Hercules kind of brings on a life of its own, where, different people are telling this story to, passing down from generation to generation. And it's kind of the same way how, with comic books, different people tell these stories and then they have different meanings.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like, there's different interpretations. I mean, that's pretty much what we have. I feel like we have the multiverse. That's what I was going to go with, the multiverse. Like, we have like different, tellings of like these characters and like, what they've experienced, what they went through, and all that, and all that crazy stuff. It's just, yeah, that's totally true. How you interpret that, like with Superman Red Son, that's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite comics, actually. That's a good example of a different retelling of Superman. As he's not in this comic. He's still Superman, but he's not exactly the good old boy from Kansas. He's not the mild-mannered reporter. He's like a figure of the Soviet state, and used to spread the Soviet propaganda. And many people, like the Prime Universe, take a liking to him just because of how relatable he is. But then ultimately, all that kind of comes crashing down when, of course, Lex Luthor comes in the picture, and it's a classic clash between Superman and Lex Luthor, but told in a whole new light. And even like what I like about your comic, Beowulf, was just that it touched on like how it warned that heroes can be villains in the heroes in the past can be villains in the future, whereas lovers in the past can be enemies, sworn enemies in the future.
Right.
And it also kind of makes me think about like the Doctor Who, the Doctor and the Master in Doctor Who,
Right.
how they're they're very good friends, but they're also enemies too, in a sense.
Right.
And yeah, even though they are at each other's throats, in the end they're still friends in a sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I see that you have, like, a lot of Star Wars toys.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you're a pretty big Star Wars fan.
Oh, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Yeah, especially of the classic trilogy too. Been a huge fan since I was 10 years old, and one good place to really look at mythology, or to see mythology's influence, if you will, is definitely Star Wars.
So, yeah, I don't know if you ever heard this story, but supposedly George Lucas wanted to make, was it Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon?
Yeah, I remember that story, and actually that was one of his influences too of making Star Wars.
Exactly. So all these stories just kind of get repeated. Like that, I think that was kind of the point you were making, that when you get right down to it, there's really only one or two heroes' journeys out there.
Yeah.
When you really get right down to it. I mean, yeah, the story of Star Wars is really not anything unique or original. It's all the little side stuff, like all the weird aliens and robots that you see.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the idea of the Force was pretty original, and I think that was the first time people had seen lightsabers, and I think obviously the special effects were very ahead of their time, which I think really helped the movie. But yeah, there was nothing, as far as the story itself, there was nothing super creative about the story of Star Wars.
Oh no, it's an old-fashioned story of good versus evil. Like we mentioned before, the hero's journey. Luke, is destined, to be a hero. I mean, actually, I think he gets more than he asked for when he wants to get out of the, Lars homestead, and then all of a sudden his aunt and uncle end up dead, at the hands of stormtroopers. And little does he know too. Also, what really rocks his world is just that, his father is, running the show, even though he thinks that his father died a heroic death.
Right.
But in reality, his father is the one who's masterminding all of this whole thing, and it just really, if you read the latest Star Wars comics, I mean, which are, to me, in my opinion, are very good. I think they're written by Charles Soule. Very good. It's like during the post Empire Strikes Back. Very good too, and it just shows Luke's struggle after what happened to him on the Empire Strikes Back, dealing with self-doubt. And even, he even rested as one Jedi who knew exactly what happened after Order 66. And, he's just faced with all this, with all these challenges and everything. And it's just, to me, it just brings more depth to, the Luke's hero's journey, and also coming to grips with himself as not only as a Jedi, but I think as a man. Right. Because, he can rely on the Skywalker name, though, but it's okay, yeah, we all know what Luke Skywalker the hero is going to do, but what's Luke Skywalker the man going to do,
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that I thought. I thought, let's see, in the 8th movie, what was that, The Last Jedi?
The Last Jedi, yeah.
I kind of liked the twist that Rey wasn't related to anybody involved in Star Wars.
She was an enigma, and that's what I liked about it too,
And then, of course, they undid that in the ninth one. But, I mean, I was actually just talking to a friend of mine about that, where it's anytime they make Star Wars movies now, because of the internet, they have to take into account everybody's opinion and, take that into account and try to, kind of adapt. And it almost feels like these movies are made by committee nowadays.
Mm.
Which I don't know how. I mean, I did like The Mandalorian, so I don't know how they got around that.
Well, I mean, yeah, The Mandalorian's really good too. Especially a buddy of mine from the Daily Planet, Brendan Rooney, brought up a good point when he mentioned how they use like world building, which makes it which makes it even more enjoyable. We get to see different worlds, different parts of the galaxy that we've never seen. And that's, to me, it's world building is one of the things that can bring a story to life. And I'm pretty sure with the Beowulf, we've seen, like with Beowulf, I feel like we're gonna see a whole lot of that. Just the link between our present world and the past world. Because I read Beowulf in high school, and
Yeah.
I remember reading the scenes where he goes against Grendel's mother and how he galvanizes everyone, to actually fight and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So yeah, you mentioned world building. The cool thing about Beowulf is that since it takes place over like centuries, we're not just going to be building worlds, in one time frame. We're going to be building, there's no reason why we can't have like Wild West Beowulf, you know what I mean?
yeah, that sounds really cool.
There's no reason why we can't have Victorian era Beowulf. There's no reason why we can't have Beowulf in a speakeasy,
Right? That'd be really cool. Like all these different incarnations of him.
Right.
And like when I read the comic too, I saw the current incarnation where he's just like, he's like skinny, he's like, doesn't have much of a life, but then this talking cat comes up to him and says, don't take those sleeping pills. You got a job to do.
Right. So yeah, so he's what's going to be revealed. Well, I don't want to give too much away, but he's been dealing with his whole life with these visions from former lives. So his way of dealing with that is kind of self-medicating himself, and now he's finally at a point where he can't, keep running away from, as you said, like kind of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
The call to action, I believe, is what Joseph Campbell called it.
The call to action, exactly. And the guide, I feel, is going to be that cat, in a sense, and also the teenage girl, who comes also, or who owns the cat. I forgot her name is
Hazel.
Hazel. Yes. And also I like how your cat is actually playing a role in that comic too. I saw pictures of your cat. It was funny. It reminds me of my cat.
Yeah. So so I had Mooney in the Kickstarter video.
Mooney, yeah.
Which, if you've ever tried, it's funny. Like, if I don't want Mooney to grow up on my lap, that's all he wants to do. But like, for shooting this video, I was trying to get him to sit on my lap and just, look like he didn't hate it for a couple minutes.
Make a cameo.
So yeah, so not only am I going to release the promotional video for this, I'm also going to release the outtakes of me trying to wrestle with Mooney and get him to sit on my lap.
Yeah, it's like my cat.
It's very cute.
Yeah, Mooney. Yeah, I have a cat. Yeah, she's like laying down on the bed right now, just like kind of like slouching, like what all cats do. And funny enough, I think I read another comic called The Credit Cat or something like that you made,
Right.
and superhero cat who just doesn't do anything, wears a cape,
Yeah, so personality-wise, I don't know if he's based on our other cat that much, but looks-wise, he was definitely based on our other cat, Stitch. So people keep asking me, are you going to figure out a way to put Stitch into Beowulf? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe if it works with the storyline, I'm not going to try to, I don't want to just put Stitch in the comic book just, so I can say both of them are in the comic book. I only want to do it if it makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So, you said when you were a kid, you've had this idea in your head. What propelled you to create this in a comic book form?
Yeah, I have I know I have comic books that I made, Beowulf comics that I made as a kid, somewhere in my parents' house. I have no idea where they are, though. I need to look for them. But so what made me want to revisit this? Basically, having a lot of free time on my hands.
Oh yeah.
The last couple months. I mean, the hard thing about being a comic book creator is, it's not just a full-time job. It's a job and a half, and a lot of times it doesn't pay the bills.
Oh yeah.
So you have to. Unfortunately, you have to have a day job. So fortunately, or I guess I shouldn't say fortunately, because I mean, obviously a lot of people have been hurt by this pandemic. But if there's one good thing about the pandemic, is that it's given me the free time to spend 10, 12 hours a day just on my comic book.
That's true too. I mean, because I've spoke to a Sean Keenan who created the Terra Olympus comic, and he told me that especially in this pandemic, independent comics are going to become more popular. People are going to actually flock to them even more because of, especially with what happened with Diamond Distributors. That was a big blow to the comic industry, and with Diamond being out of the picture, like how people are going to distribute their comics. So it was a time for comic creators, I feel, and comic book stores too, and even publishers to kind of figure out, what are other ways we can actually distribute our content over to our fans. And
yeah, I don't know how much it's going to affect indie comic books, because the thing is, like, it's always been so hard for indie comics to get distributed by Diamond. But I do think Kickstarter is going to be the way to sell comic books, at least for the next few years. I keep waiting for the whole Kickstarter thing seems too good to be true. I keep thinking that there's going to be some type of backlash to it, just because this is like the first time we as comic book creators don't need to go through the comic book publisher. You know what I mean? We don't need.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, what kind of? Well, you say backlash, but what kind of backlash do you mean? Like, what would that entail?
Well, I mean, I think you've seen over the past couple years, bigger and bigger comic book companies using Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously, when the Power Rangers comic book came out.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, those things, like, especially with like the little boxes and all that, a lot of money.
I feel like that's gonna be. I mean, I don't know if there's been a lot of backlash to that, but I do know that there were people who were mad, like saying stuff like, okay, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers are a multi-million-dollar property. Why do they need Kickstarter? Kickstarter is supposed to be for the little guys.
It's funny that you kind of touched up on that too, because it kind of reminded me a lot of with Keanu Reeves' comic Berserker, I think it was.
Another one.
Yeah, that was another one that got some backlash, and my sister even told me too. Like, there was like this guy who, he was saying that, oh, you guys, kind of being a Keanu mark, basically. And I like Keanu Reeves; he's cool, but I think it's just. I think Kickstarter is a way for other comic book publishers, I feel, to like kind of take advantage of Kickstarter when people who don't have that platform, like that Kickstarter is supposed to be for the people who don't have a platform, who don't have a publisher.
I mean, I can see both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
Because I mean, us, like, diehard comic book fans, we all know what Kickstarter is, and we all are on there on a regular basis. But the casual comic book fans don't necessarily know what Kickstarter is.
Oh no.
And they don't necessarily know that there are a lot of comic books. So the big thing that the Keanu Reeves comic book, Berserker, did was that ended up being in a lot of newspapers, a lot of websites, a lot of news articles. So that brings attention to Kickstarter, which is a good thing. Like I said, there's two sides to the story. Like, on one hand, it stinks that Keanu Reeves is kind of taking attention away from people who maybe need the money, unlike him. But on the other hand, yeah, he's bringing more attention to the platform.
Yeah, it's like, it's sort of like, a good and a bad thing in a sense. And even with other entities like Indiegogo, and same deal. And then, like, of course, another thing you have to mention is Comicsgate too. That's another one.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about Indiegogo. To be honest with you, like, I've only gotten on the Kickstarter like in the last maybe 5-6 months. It's pretty fascinating to me that there's like this whole little subculture that's kind of built up around Kickstarter. Like, you go on, these Facebook groups, and it's like they have a whole complete different culture. Everybody knows each other. Oh yeah, you're the guy who did this comic book, aren't you? And I have to say, it's pretty cool.
It's like a networking. It's like another community.
Yeah. So that was, you mentioned Indiegogo. One of the big differences between Indiegogo and Kickstarter is that Indiegogo doesn't have like policies, against like hate groups and stuff like that. So, to be honest with you, I haven't ventured a lot into Indiegogo. I don't know much about it. I'm debating on whether or not I want to put Beowulf on Indiegogo after I do the Kickstarter. The thing that kind of scares me is, as you kind of alluded to, there's some problematic people on Indiegogo.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been pretty fortunate. I've been able to avoid most of the really problematic people, just because, like I said, on Kickstarter they do have policies against hate groups. But like I said, Indiegogo is the Wild West.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, Indiegogo, it's like the wild card. I mean, it's like shoot 'em up, or anyone can like do whatever. But yeah,
Anybody can put anything they want to on Indiegogo.
But I mean, at some point there needs to be, like, I feel like there does need to be some kind of regulations of like what should be on and what shouldn't be on. I feel, I mean, I kind of get where Indiegogo may be coming from. I mean, in a First Amendment point of view, but on the same note, though, it's just that, yeah, I mean, the question is, do you want to be promoting something that could actually hurt, someone in a sense? I mean, especially with what's been going on right now with, like, what's been going on these past few months or this past year, and, especially like with what happened in the Cap, it's like, that's no joke. And a lot of that had to do with, like, I feel like a lot of it just had to do with people who were just, I mean, of course, I mean, everyone's a human being, but people who were just triggered. That's pretty much a good, that's the word I can use. I mean, that's the word I've been using to describe 2020, and a little bit at the beginning of this year too. It's just people have been triggered, and that's why what happened at the Capitol happened. And Amazon had to take action to shut down Parler. That was one of, that's, for instance, that was one of them. And Parler was kind of like, the Wild Wild West, like you mentioned with Indiegogo. There was really no restrictions as to, what to say, or, and yeah, so it's like, I totally understand, like, how, why people would be, like creators like yourself would be a little hesitant to go on Indiegogo. You know, because of course you're going to always have people who are going to say stuff, and especially like people from Comicsgate. I mean, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, and at the end of the day, though. But it doesn't mean that we have to buy into it either.
Well, yeah. So I mean, that's something that when I started doing this comic book and realizing that I have to promote it, that was something that kind of scared me, because I mean, let's be honest, a lot of times you have like these nice quick little interactions with people on the internet. You don't really know much about them. I mean,
no, you don't.
I mean, let's say, I could be talking to somebody on Instagram or Twitter for 4 or 5 months, and then out of nowhere they say something insanely racist. It's kind of scary, and it's kind of scary, when I'm going on, like these interview shows like this, because I mean, I can see both sides of the story, because maybe we are a little bit too quick to cancel people nowadays. Like I saw somebody posted something on Twitter the other day that said, if I find out that you listen to this podcast, you're done. I'm done with you.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, that's kind of scary, because, when I start listening to a podcast, I don't always know. Sometimes it's like the 3rd or 4th episode before, the podcast host says something problematic. Like, I don't know if you've ever had that experience where, you're watching somebody's YouTube channel, you're starting to like the YouTube channel, you think they have some interesting insights.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, he says something really horrible, like
out of left field.
Right. So, yeah, to me, I mean, there are definitely people in the comic book industry who need to be canceled. And I mean, I would say at this point, if you don't know that Ethan Van Sciver is kind of a bad guy, you need to pay more attention. I would say, if there's still people who are listening to like Ethan Van Sciver's YouTube channel after all the horrible stuff he said about women, making fun of people who have cancer, like,
oh man,
that guy. I kind of agree. Let's cut you out, but I don't know. I guess I feel like people just need to be a little bit more level-headed.
Well, yeah, I mean, they need to like kind of. I feel like people need to like kind of think. It's almost like going back to elementary school. Think before you say something. A lot of times it's not what you say; it's how you say it too. In a sense, like there's a little bit of that, and it's like I feel like. Just some people have forgotten to do that, in my opinion. Like that's just me personally, and yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I mean, people, again, people are entitled to their opinion though, but it's almost like, they, it's like there are going to be consequences to what you say, no matter what. Like, there are going to be consequences. I mean, look at what happened to Gina Carano, for instance. It was just wow,
Well, yeah, so I think the big thing that people forget is, people like to hide behind the First Amendment. But, you have to remember that really all the First Amendment says is that you can't go to jail for something that you said. It doesn't say anything about getting fired. It doesn't say anything about, your girlfriend breaking up with you. It doesn't mean that, you're not going to lose people reading your comic books. So, yeah, people hide behind the First Amendment, but really, most of these issues are not First Amendment issues. What's her name? Gina? I'm not sure how you pronounce her last name.
I think it's Carano.
Carano. See, I mean, this is another problem because I don't follow her on Twitter, so everything I know that she said, I've learned secondhand.
Right, like from articles and all that, and from other tweets and other posts.
So I mean, everything that I know that she's said, I mean, a lot of the stuff that she's said sounds pretty bad, but of course, like I said, I've only heard this third or fourth hand. So that's kind of scary too, like to think that, who knows if people are even quoting you correctly.
Well, I mean, there's always that possibility. I mean, like, the thing is, it's like, to use like sort of like an extreme example like Nazism. I mean, I don't know, like that's no, like
yeah, it's probably better not to just not mess with people like that.
No.
Yeah, and yeah, like I said, I don't know, because it's hard for me. You brought up like the people storming the Capitol. There were people on Facebook saying, good for them the next day. And I made a policy of just like saying, look, if you support any of this stuff at this point, just I don't care to talk to you anymore.
Well, see, that's a thing. In the end of the day, it's like when it comes to like talking about like politics and all that, like I made this policy where it's like, look, I'm a believer of people coming together. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, we're Americans first. Like, all that other political garbage, it's just I don't care, Like, not to be mean though, but it's just that I want people to like come together and work together to come up with a solution, like not throw stuff at each other, and the media, not, I mean, some of the media, I'm not saying all of the media, but there's some people in the media that like to poke the bear or, feed the fire. And it's just like, I'm not all about that. I'm just all about, see, as a journalist, like, I like to state the facts. Like, this is what's going on. I'm not going to put too much emotion into it and be like, oh, it makes me, it's like, to me, that's up to like the public, how they want to construe it or perceive it. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I feel like telling some people in the media that your job as a journalist is supposed to just report the facts,
Isn't that weird how nowadays we have like the liberal news and we have the conservative news? That was never what it was growing up.
No.
When I was growing up, people didn't watch either liberal news or conservative news when I was a kid. They just watched the news.
It was just the news, exactly, and yeah, and it's just, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, they're the news too, but it's like, still though, I mean, I feel like it's a bit sensationalized, but, I mean, it's just, yeah, so for me personally, I just have that policy where, I try to leave politics out of, just everything, I mean, unless, of course, if it's like facts or whatever, cool, but other than that, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who's a photojournalist. He works for a newspaper.
Oh, cool.
He was telling me, it's so hard to get people to pick up a newspaper. Well, it's almost impossible to get people to pick up a newspaper. But even, to read an article on their phone is really hard in this day and age. So, yeah, when everybody's competing like that, the news is just going to get more and more salacious. Which, yeah, I feel like the divide between people is getting bigger and bigger. There are people out there who are very reasonable, but then there are people on the far right and then people on the far left. And I don't know, a lot of times it feels to me like the gap is like too big for us to be able to bridge it.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? What do you think can be done to bridge the gap between the far right and the far left?
Well, I feel like, going back to, how we can come together is just that, to find common interests. Like, for instance, hey, who likes comic books, right? I feel like that's something that can bring people together. Just enjoying, like, the stuff that people enjoy, stuff that brings happiness. I feel that that's one of the things that can bring people together. And I think a lot of it, the reason why we're getting so divided, I feel, is just because, most of the things that, a lot of things, because of this pandemic have, been put on hold. Like, I feel like people kind of feel like they had to put their lives on hold because of this whole pandemic or whatever it is that happened to them. And that's pretty much why they chose, to be further divided. And, yeah, but I feel that, too, it's like, if they can find something that they have in common, I feel like that can bring them back together and, like, put aside their differences.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I know a big controversy now is whether or not there should be politics in comic books.
See, that's another big one too, because, like, even subtle mentions of, like, there's some subtle, influences too as well. I think for me, it's just that, it just depends on the message overall. As long as it's not hurting anybody or it's not targeting a certain group, I say have at it. But, or if it's for educational purposes, perhaps, like teaching a young child or an adolescent about, how things are run. I mean, I guess that's a good way to go about it, though. But now if it's going to incite hatred or whatever, like, or anything like that, then that's where I kind of have the issue. Or if it's just like like stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, in previous generations, a lot of the stuff, like, obviously the X-Men is a very political comic book. And
that's true.
I don't know in previous generations if people, threw down the comic book and said, "Oh, I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to, just because I disagree with maybe the politics of this comic book, I'm going to throw it down and never read it again." And I think you could also make that argument, with Star Trek,
Star
Twilight.
Wars.
Yeah, all of these things had politics in it. I feel like people were just more willing to kind of accept stories that maybe weren't exactly their political viewpoint.
Kind of like Watchmen too, in a sense.
Yep.
I feel Watchmen's a really good example. Like, just like with Rorschach, I feel like with Rorschach and Ozymandias, it was like the right versus the left, in a sense. And you look at and I feel like with Daniel Dreiberg, the Night Owl, and even to some extent Silk Spectre, Laurie Giuspecci,
Right.
They were kind of representative of, like, the American people, just, kind of deciding on, who was right or who wasn't, And then, like, all of a sudden these two, then you got Dr. Manhattan, who I think represents just the power, structure of America, in a sense. Now that I think about it,
Yeah, I mean, we're still talking about Watchmen, what, almost 30 years later?
Almost 30 years, and it's a real powerful comic. And matter of fact, they have the Rorschach comic that's out right now. I've been reading that comic, really closely, and
how do you like those?
Actually, I think Tom King, he's writing a pretty cool, I like Tom King's writing anyway, but that story in particular is an interesting one.
I should check that out. I like some of the covers.
Oh yeah, some of the covers are phenomenal.
I started watching the Watchmen TV show. It wasn't that I thought it was bad or anything. I think there's just so much other TV. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so hard to keep up with all of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, the Watchmen TV series was definitely I enjoyed it. Just a whole different take on Watchmen, and just it was sort of like a revamping, or not revamp, but it was more like, I don't know, like, to me it was more like, I feel like it was kind of like what Watchmen would be like in our generation, I guess. Just without the giant squid. Falling on New York City.
I think the thing that I liked about Watchmen was it didn't feel like contrived in that they didn't feel the need to keep like jamming in like references
Yeah.
to the original show. Like we were kind of talking about that earlier, like with Rey and Star Wars, where what got on my nerves about that was like, you know, oh, you know, Rey isn't related to anybody. Oh no, we changed our mind. She's spoiler alert, she's Emperor Palpatine's daughter, or was she his daughter or his granddaughter? I can't remember.
His granddaughter, yeah. Like I was like kind of scratching my head on that one too, because I've had several friends who are fans of the new trilogy who thought she was going to be Luke Skywalker's daughter.
Right.
And I've heard rumors that she was actually supposed to be, you know, related to Obi-Wan Kenobi somehow. But then they kept on flip-flopping, and it was like, what the heck? And ultimately they settled with Palpatine, and to me it's just like how is that possible? I mean, I guess because like they said like he cloned himself or something like that, and like he had like a son who decided like to like not, you know, follow his footsteps or some crap like that, and then like he just kills him, you know, like
You know why I liked it when originally they were saying she wasn't anybody's daughter? I like that because you know what that means? That means anybody can be a Jedi.
well, there you go. Anyone can be a Jedi, you know, especially if they have midichlorians, you know.
Right. But then, of course, they changed that. So, you know, so that she would be Emperor Palpatine's daughter or granddaughter, and it's like, well, you know, this kind of sucks that, like, pretty much, unless your mom or dad is a Jedi, that means you'll probably never be a Jedi. I don't know, that just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, that's true too.
To me.
Cause like I don't know. I mean, I didn't see too much of the Rise of Skywalker, but like, you know, wasn't like her father like wasn't he like Force sensitive, or did he just like not use the Force? Like, I kind of wonder, you know.
Yeah, so originally they were saying that Rey was nobody's daughter. She was just a random lady. But then I guess like the fans were mad about that. Like I was literally in a gas station, like buying a snack, and I was wearing a Star Wars t-shirt, and some guy like came up to me and started asking me like what I thought of like Star Wars, and he went on this big long rant about how mad he was that it turned out that Rey wasn't Luke Skywalker's daughter. I was like, okay, dude, it's like 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm just trying to... And it was like, so like, I mean, that's like that's why they reversed that decision, which I don't know. I didn't like that decision, but like I said, there are millions of other people in the world who liked that decision, so I don't know. Like, I don't know how you make movies knowing that as soon as the movie comes out, you know, every decision you make, half the people are going to love it and the other half are going to hate it. And then, you know, like, the next movie, you're going to have to completely change what you did in the last movie to accommodate people.
Yeah, I kind of remember too, like Rian Johnson, like, oh, that's a cool Superman mug.
Thank you.
Like, right? Huh?
It says Grant on it.
Oh, nice. But Rian Johnson, like, he was just crapped on, you know what I mean, for making, like, you know, like the Last Jedi and all that. And, you know, you gotta admit, that movie did have its own flaws, you know. I mean, even Mark Hamill agreed, saying that, you know, he didn't feel like he was playing Luke Skywalker, he was playing like a Jake Skywalker, basically, you know. And yeah, you know, I mean, I feel that, you know, like, with the fans, I mean, I think it was just that then Solo was another movie that really took some heat, you know, I mean, from The Last Jedi.
Can I tell you something? I kind of liked Solo.
I liked Solo too. I did.
It was a guilty pleasure for sure. But I mean, I honestly, if it was just a movie and the main character's name wasn't Han Solo, I think people would have liked that movie a lot better.
That's true too.
You know what I liked about it? I liked how it was like kind of about like the seedier sides of Star Wars. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was kind of like about, you know, like the scoundrels and all the, you know, illegal trading and stuff that goes on in the Star Wars Empire, their Star Wars universe. I don't know. I felt like that movie kind of got a bad rap.
Yeah, it did.
And I also feel like nowadays, like, just expectations are like so high every time a movie comes out.
Oh yeah, you know, no kidding. Like, you know, look at the Batman, for instance. You know, I mean, look at the Snyder Cut, even. You know, I mean, which I have no doubt the Snyder Cut's going to do awesome. You know, I mean, because of after what happened with Joss Whedon, it was just, man, you know. But you know, I mean, the Justice League has a chance to, you know, has a chance for a rare opportunity to redeem itself. You know.
Are you excited about it?
Well, I'm very excited about it. I'm actually gonna see it. Yeah, because
I mean,
like
we have HBO Max, so I mean, I guess there's no reason for me to not watch it.
yeah, you know, I mean, I'm definitely gonna watch it for sure. And but I mean, especially with like after the MCU, you know, and the Avengers and all that, people, you know, fans everywhere have been, you know, craving for more, and the expectations have never been set so high. Actually, even for science fiction films, you know, like the upcoming films like The Matrix. That's another one too. That's expected to, I mean, fans are expecting for it to do well.
That's right. I forgot that they're making a fourth Matrix movie.
Yeah, I don't know when it comes out though, but I mean, I would imagine it would come out either this year or next year, perhaps. But you know,
Yeah, I don't know when anything comes out anymore.
right?
That's the nice thing about comic books. I can make them here in my living room. I don't have to worry about hiring a big cast of people who could potentially give me COVID. I can just do it right here.
Well,
There.
right. Well, speaking of making comics, like since you made your first comic, Beowulf, like, what was the process going into making this comic? Like, did you did you do it digitally, or did you just do it like, you know?
So me personally, I do everything digitally.
Oh yeah.
I don't see the point in sitting around with a pencil and pen. I mean, I know that there's some people who love that. How do I put this? I don't think there's anything noble about making things harder on yourself.
Yeah, amen.
I mean, I do everything on the computer. I even do like the layouts, like the initial drawings and stuff in Photoshop. So yeah, I almost never get out a pencil, like a regular pencil and pen anymore. I think I do everything on my Wacom tablet.
Way to save trees, man.
So, and I don't necessarily write out like a regular script. I do a lot of drawings, and then I write the dialogue in the margins. And then after I do that 4 or 5 pages, then I'll go back and I'll say like, okay, this dialogue sucks. This dialogue needs to be better. This dialogue is okay. You know, and I'm constantly editing things. From the very, I mean, originally I thought this six issue comic book was going to be like 10 issues. That tells you how much I edited. Like Stephen King has the 2/3 rule. Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-mm.
So the first time Stephen King sent out a script, or I guess a short story, to an editor, the editor wrote on the paper, second draft equals 2/3 of first draft. In other words, you're
Mm.
supposed to cut out a third of your story between the first and the second draft.
That makes sense. Reminds me of my creative writing workshops back in college. Like sometimes, like when you work on that first draft, you want to make sure everything is like as clean as day. Everything is just spick and span. But then that professor and those students always come up with their own suggestions or their revisions, and boom, like sometimes it cuts like it almost cuts like at least a third of the story. It's like, eek, I've been there.
Yeah, so I wrote out the entire script, and then I went back and I cut out about a third of it, and then I hired an editor for this comic book. His name is Jason Snyder, and he told me you need to cut another 1/3.
Man.
So and that was something that he said, as a first-time comic book creator, people aren't necessarily going to stick around 10 or 12 issues if you're just going to tell one story. You need to figure out a way to condense this story. So, yeah, I cut out another 1/3. And, once you start cutting stuff out, it becomes easier and easier to cut stuff out.
It becomes more leaner, yeah.
And the thing that I remember my editor Jason said to me, he said, you have this entire scene here that takes up like 2 or 3 pages, and I know the only reason why you kept this scene in here is because you like this one little piece of dialogue here. And he was like, that's why you kept this scene, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, kind of. He goes, all you have to do is copy and paste that, put it like in a separate file, and you can always add that dialogue to another scene, like somewhere down the line. You know what I mean? Like have a file that's just called unused ideas.
Almost like a deleted scene in a sense.
Right.
Yeah. That's, wow. Yeah. Never thought of it that way.
Obviously that's why editing is hard.
Oh, it's hard, and sometimes it can be, it can be heartbreaking too, because that one scene that you thought was really awesome, and it gets cut out. It's like, oh no, and it's like, but after a while, you see it from their point of view, and then it's like, okay, maybe.
So yeah, so like I was kind of saying, like sometimes if there's a scene where you like one little thing about that scene, but overall the scene isn't really going anywhere, you have to cut that scene. But the nice thing is, usually you can take that one little thing that you liked about that one scene and figure out a way to put it somewhere else in the comic.
That's true too. Yeah. This is not. I think what they also want to really count on is just that, is it going to help the narrative flow of the story? Because if it does, cool. If not, then you need to figure out how to like best put it somewhere else. Make it fit, or it is
Well, and also doing that is good writing, because what you want is each scene to have 2 or 3 little things going on, as opposed to one thing. You know what I mean? So if you have one scene where that it demonstrates something about the character, but it doesn't really advance the plot, and then you have another scene that advances the plot, but it doesn't really say anything about the character, if you can combine those 2 scenes, then you have 2 things going on at the same time instead of one thing, which that's good writing.
Oh yeah.
It's, what's the word? It's economic writing, you know what I mean?
And plus, I would believe that it would save a lot of space on, because especially when you're writing a comic, you're not just writing a story, you're writing something that has to carry the art, because say if an artist were to look at that, and the artist can construe it any way, and if the writing does not complement the art and vice versa, then it's not going to go so well, obviously.
So, back to the original question. You asked about the process.
Yeah.
So, after I get done writing and writing and writing, and then editing and editing and editing, then I do like the layouts. Or I kind of do the layouts and the writing and the editing kind of at the same time. Which I do. So I have a penciler who is helping me out. His name is Antonio Brandau.
Yeah.
Instead of sending him descriptions of each panel, I just send him drawings. Because to me, like, the problem with comic books is that they're very visual. So like,
oh yeah.
So like, I need to see, while I'm writing it, I need to see it there on the page. Because I can't wrap my head around why is it that like some pages have 9 panels and it looks normal, but other pages have 6 panels and it looks crowded. You know what I mean? I need to draw it out as I'm writing it.
Well, I would say, like, you know, for a scene that has a lot of panels, I think back to Watchmen, another Watchmen reference, and I feel like, you know, a lot of times, sometimes you need a lot of panels to kind of, like, for me to, like, I think, invoke some suspense or some, like, kind of, like, reaction, or that's another word for it. Yeah, like that. Like, you know, for instance, like, you know, say, for example, the button dropping, for instance, like, you know, there's several panels showing the button dropping and dropping and dropping until it hits a, you know, at the end of the panel it goes thunk, you know, just to evoke suspense and all that. And I think I've learned that from, I want to say I learned that from Scott McCloud's comic. You know, Scott McCloud's really good, actually. He, you know, if you really want to, like, you know, create a comic, definitely read his book. I'm thinking about creating a comic book in the future soon myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah, hopefully I'm going to announce it soon. I mean, it's been part of the idea that's been in my head since college, you know.
I'd love to read it, yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, you brought up Watchmen, like, yeah. Dave Gibbons is a guy who likes to cram his pages with lots of panels. You know, he's kind of old school in that. And he worked on a grid, which a lot of comic book artists don't anymore. Some do, but I mean, there are positives and negatives to that. One of the big things about, you know, if every page in your comic book is a grid, except for one page, that one page is going to make such a huge impact.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? If you make that the climax,
like the splash.
right?
Yeah, that's you know, the splash is another one that can be like boom, you know. And I think, you know, if you read this other comic, it's called Crossover, and it's by Danny Cates, one of my favorite writers.
I need to read that. I've heard so many good things about it.
It's a very good comic, and a lot of splashes used, and it's just, yeah, you know, just like stuff that, you know, especially with the art, it's just such a wow factor, you know. Yeah, so yeah, art is just as effective as the writing, and of course, you know, a lot of people forget the lettering too. You know, that's a whole other thing. You know, because without the lettering, you can't really, in a sense, hear the comic. You know, like, you know, the booms or the pows or the splashes. It's like, yeah.
Right. So anyways, so back to the process. So I do the layouts. I send them to Antonio. Antonio usually draws it out roughly the way that I drew it. Sometimes he gets a little bit creative. That's fine. Sometimes he improves my sketches. Usually he improves my sketches. Then he sends them back to me. I very rarely complain about anything. Like, usually there'll be, like, there might be one revision, if even that, per page. Then I start inking it. and I ink it digitally as well. So then I send it out to colorist, and I just discovered something recently. There are people out there who will do like all the mundane little boring parts of coloring, like drawing around the lines to make sure that like everything stays within the line. There are people who will do that for you super cheap, and it's not really a creative job, so you can just like for like $10 it'll save you like 4 or 5 hours worth of work. So that's kind of nice. That's a trick I just recently learned. They're called color flats. If you hire somebody to do flats for your colors, that can save you like a lot of time and money.
Oh yeah. So wow, that's a good tip. I mean, shoot, color flats, yeah. So do you find them on Fiverr or something like that, or?
I've been finding them on Facebook actually. Like if you go to, it's like if you search for groups on Facebook, like colorists, you can find them. So you said that you were thinking about doing a comic book.
Yeah, I was actually. You know, I mean, it's one of my goals this year.
So what's... Okay, I'm going to turn into your dad for a second.
Oh boy.
What's keeping you from starting on the comic book?
Well, let's see. So, if anything, well, myself actually, I would have to say, this is not really my full-time job. I mean, this is just something I like to do. I do work 40 hours a week, and I only have so much time to do other things, and it's just, yeah. I mean, I have to understand that, I gotta learn how to manage my time better. I mean, trust me, like, time management's one of the things I struggle with, even as a creative.
Well, the cool thing is that you're doing, this show, which this is a very good way of getting your name out there.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's always a good thing. I keep thinking, I have my newsletter, and I would love for you to be in my newsletter, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
I'll send you a message about that. But, the more stuff you have, like whether it's a podcast, Twitch videos, YouTube videos, the more stuff that you have getting your name out there, the better. Because that's something that I was shocked to discover, when I started doing this comic book, and I started sending out this comic book to like publishers, and a lot of them were like, "Hey, you've got a really neat idea for a comic book, and we like the art, but you have no online presence." I was like, "You have to remember, I'm older than you, so you have to remember, like, when I was in high school, they didn't even teach us what an online presence was. So, like, I'm like, what the hell is an online presence? And that was when I started saying, like, oh God, I need to, like, catch up with all these people who have been doing podcasts since they were 12 years old, So I'm saying that's one good thing that you've got going for you. You've got this show that you can use to promote your comic book.
That's true.
So if you do a comic book, do you think you're going to do superhero, science fiction, fantasy?
I want to say, like, it's going to it's going to obviously be a superhero comic, and it's going to have elements of fantasy in it too. Like, sort of like Beowulf, it's going to be a hero's journey story, kind of story, and yeah, I've already started to do a little brainstorming on it too of what's going to be inside. I mean, it's going to actually carry out some influences of my life. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. You want it to be autobiographical at least a little bit.
At least a little bit.
That's cool. I'm looking forward to it. Do you draw?
Oh no, I'm more of a writer. I mean, as a kid, I used to draw a whole lot though. But like I'm definitely, am going to be looking for an artist, who would carry out, the story, someone who I can really gel with and who just creates awesome art.
Right. Cool. I look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Yeah, I definitely would like let you know, and then like you definitely people are going to definitely see it on my social media, hopefully soon, especially when I start really getting right on the time management thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's another big hurdle you have when you're doing comic books, because like I said, it's very much against human nature to sit in front of either a drawing board or a computer for 10 or 11 hours straight.
It's a screen suck, man, like especially when you like work full time and you're on the computer anyway, and it's just like, oh.
Right. Yeah, and trust me, man, I get it. Like I said, I mean, if this whole pandemic hadn't happened, if I hadn't, I mean, I was doing like anthology comic books, 8 or 9 page stories, like once every couple months. But I mean, the story of Beowulf that's spread out over 6 issues. This is definitely a lot more rewarding, I think, both for me and the readers.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially with 6 issues, I mean that's a good amount of issues to tell a story.
Right.
That's like basically that's like a mini series right there. I mean, that's and who knows, you might be able to make you might be able to even incorporate part of those other 6 issues into volume number 2.
Right.
Or at least tell a different tell like a different story where I mean just like that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's unlimited potential in this story. I think the next story I want to do is probably going to be a shorter story, but like I said, I would like to do something like Old West Beowulf, or
That'd be sick.
Beowulf in the Victorian era, or something that I just came up with while I was talking to you is like, if we did like a film noir Beowulf, like something like a 1940s detective story.
That'd be really awesome. I like noir, especially like like Spider-Man noir. One of my favorite versions of Spider-Man.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's no limit to potential.
There really isn't.
So, yeah, I don't know what the next story that I do after this 6 issue. I mean, honestly, it's so much work. I haven't put a lot of thought into what I'm going to do after this 6 issues arc, but I definitely want it to take place in like a different era, a different time.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of got me thinking about like Spawn in a sense, where there's different versions of him, like medieval Spawn, Wild West Spawn.
Exactly.
I mean, Todd McFarlane, he's a real genius when it comes to like writing these kind of characters.
Isn't that amazing that, like, I mean, like I said, I think you're younger than me, but I remember, like, since I was a kid, he's been publishing Spawn, and it's crazy to think he's still publishing it.
Yeah, I think like he started doing it like around 1997 when he joined like the the Image 7, who bailed out on Marvel. And Todd McFarlane, it's interesting about him too, because like the way he drew Spider-Man's webs, like and Marvel was like, oh no, just make it like into these lines or whatever. And Todd McFarlane's like, well, wait a minute, like these, this is actually the way we should do it, like and fans like it, and like they kind of laughed and like, no, you're screwing yourself, they're not gonna like it. But lo and behold, fans were like, this is awesome, and the Marvel execs were like, what the flip? And funny enough, the Marvel execs, ironically enough, probably wouldn't artist themselves. Now, if it was a group of artists, they probably would have been like, okay, cool. And I guess that's why Image was formed, because, they didn't want, like, anyone corporate, or let's just say people who don't know how to create a comic book or don't know anything about comics, telling them what to do. And it's just that, not to go off on a bit of a tangent, though, but if you look at the WWE, for example, I'm a huge pro wrestling fan, too. you got a lot of the people, running that company who have not wrestled, writers who have never been in a ring before, telling wrestlers, this is how you should act, this is how you should speak, this is how you should walk and do all this and that. And the wrestlers just sitting there wondering, like, so wait a minute, this guy who's never been through what I've been through, like on the road, going to like wrestling school, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches just to get by, telling me what to do, like, what's wrong with that picture? And, you got AEW, All Elite Wrestling, where it's run by, AEW is kind of like the image of pro wrestling. It was, founded by a bunch of guys who just didn't want to be, run by a corporate machine. And I feel like, they have a better grasp of understanding with what the performer goes through. Now, I'm not saying they're all perfect, but like Image, they have an understanding of what the creator, goes through on the day-to-day. And that's why they're not as judgmental as, say, someone who's like a quote-unquote executive, someone who's an executive would, like, telling them, like, oh, you shouldn't write Superman that way, or, you know what, no, Flash shouldn't be like that. It's like, well, what do you know? Have you read an issue of The Flash, for instance? I think about that, and it's just that, especially with Kickstarters, the cool thing about independent comics, in my opinion, is that you're not going to have that one person who breathes down your back and tells you, you know what, you shouldn't draw your character that way. Fans are not going to respond to that. Well, it's like, okay, fans may or may not respond very well, though, but this is my comic, this is my creation, Right.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see it, too. Like, if you're putting out an indie comic book, you know what, your readers might like the comic book, or they might not.
They might not, yeah.
Maybe not everything is gonna... Maybe not everything is gonna work 100%. But you know what, at least it's your vision out there. As opposed to, Spider-Man, which it has to go through has to be approved by so many different people. It's designed by a committee.
That's insane.
And the more people who are on a project, the more people who have to approve something, the more people who stick their fingers in it, it gets a little bit more watered down.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever you want to say about indie comic books, at least they're not watered down.
At least they're not watered down. And funny enough, even like, even people who are working for Marvel and DC and all that are doing indie comics as well.
Have you watched any of the Image Comics documentaries?
I've seen one. I think I've seen one on MTV. I did see the Todd McFarlane documentary recently on Sci-Fi. That was a good one.
There's that. There's like 4 or 5 Image Comics documentaries now, just because it's such an interesting story.
Oh yeah, it's a very interesting story of how those dudes just just decided to be like, you know what, we're going to actually we're actually going to bet on ourselves for once and just do this thing.
Doesn't it just amaze you that still exists, like, after all these years? Like, it almost sounds like a fairy tale when you think about Image Comics, doesn't it?
It's a Cinderella story, yeah.
I mean, they're the number 3 comic book publisher after Marvel and DC. It's amazing that it's lasted this long and that they're still, like, viable.
And, like, not to mention the fact that, TV shows movies are being made based on Image Comics. Spawn being the first. Like, actually, Spawn was like the first film to come out of Image Comics, and then you had like a cartoon, even I think based on Wildstorm, I want to say.
Oh god, I remember that Spawn movie. Oh god.
I remember it, yeah. And then you got The Walking Dead and Preacher.
Yeah, I mean, Walking Dead turned out pretty good.
Oh yeah, I love The Walking Dead. Matter of fact, I don't know if you see it though, but it got that little.
Oh, is that what that's from?
Yeah.
I saw you have a dude back there. I couldn't tell what it was. Oh, cool.
It's Negan. One of my favorite villains, actually, by the way.
Cool.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't like was that he bashed the head of my favorite character, Glenn. That sucked, man. Glenn was cool, but other than that, Negan's cool.
It's funny how the TV show kind of figured out a way to be so different from the comic book, but still good.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing, like, how they did all that. I mean, they did somewhat match the comic, though, but then at the same time, they threw several, like, twists, into the, show and all that. Like, instead of, like, for instance, like, they kind of threw a wrench with the whole Glenn thing, too, where, at first, we thought it was going to be Glenn that was going to initially get hit with Lucille, but then it turned out to be Abraham. But then it eventually became Glenn, because, like, many people kind of got mad at the whole dumpster part where, they thought Glenn was eaten, but then he was alive, and it was just like, okay, maybe Glenn's going to live. But then it's like, oh, he really does die by Lucille's, little baseball bat, and it's just like,
You know what, I need to go back and reread some of those comics. I don't know if I ever completely finished the comic book series. I don't think I read the last, like, 20 or 30 issues.
Oh, I mean, I read like the comic. I think I did like a little bit of a marathon read, and it just, especially the last one, was just like, wow, and yeah, and I think I also read like several of the Negan spinoffs, like Here's Negan. I also own my copy of Negan Lives.
Yeah, I'm really bad about finishing stuff once I start it. I have probably like 12 different TV shows on Netflix and Hulu that I started but never finished.
It's like with me and My Hero Academia. Like I barely finished season 3. But I love that show. I mean, it's just Ezekiel Midoriya is one of my favorite characters, and there's Bahiko, who's just a hothead. I mean, he literally is a hothead. And of course, All Might. Just these characters are just so. It's just so funny, but then at the same time, it just makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, especially philosophically speaking, it's like you can actually relate to it.
Yeah. I need to sit down and watch that as well.
I mean, yeah. I mean, just like like with Doctor Who, actually, I became funny enough. Like before I actually started watching the show, I was told about it in passing, a couple of years ago when I after I graduated college in 2011, and I was just like, okay, Doctor Who, whatever. But then, like 3 years later, I'm sitting in my room, and I was going through a really rough patch at the time, but I was sitting in my room, and I just started watching it, and it kind of got me through some tough times, just seeing the Doctor time and time again, just solving problems, using his wit, and especially, I think the first Doctor Who I've seen was the season with David Tennant, the 10th Doctor. He became my favorite Doctor too, and it was just like, wow, it may look corny though, but it's actually amazing.
So that's a show that so many of my friends that's one of my wife's favorite shows, and I have so many friends who love that show, but I don't know. One of my problems is like I don't know where to dive in, because it's like so intimidating, because there's like 40 seasons.
Oh, this Doctor Who goes back like 1960, around the same time as Batman.
So it's probably closer to like 70 seasons.
Yeah, and like even to this day, there's a couple of lost episodes still out there. I mean, that they haven't found. Like they found like maybe like about a couple, but there's still some lost radio episodes or serials of the first Doctor.
So would you suggest I start with the David Tennant?
I would say David Tennant's good. I would also even suggest, or if you really want, like, you can start with Christopher Eccleston. He's like the 9th Doctor. He was also pretty good though, but he only stayed on for 1 year until he regenerated into David Tennant's Doctor.
Okay.
Yeah, or if you want to go a little more casual, I would say maybe start with like Peter Capaldi, or Matt Smith's another good one. The current one, Jodie Whittaker, she's actually pretty good. I mean, she seems like she's fun. I mean, I haven't seen too much of the episode, but I've heard some good things about her.
Yeah, I know that she just recently said that she's not going to do anymore.
Yeah, I heard about that too.
A lot of people were mad about that. But
Yeah.
you can only do so many, right?
You can only do so many, yeah. You know. But otherwise, I mean, overall, Doctor Who is just, I think it's a real awesome show. I mean, if you haven't seen it yet, I mean, I totally recommend. I mean, especially anyone, watches an episode of Doctor Who, they'll be wowed. I mean, they'll be surprised. I mean, it looks corny. If you really get into the story, I mean, you'll get into the story.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I don't have anything against it. It's just like, it's so intimidating when you look at how many different versions there are. Like,
there are a ton of, yeah, there's like over, like, I think there's like 13 versions, or actually, make that 15 versions of the Doctor. I mean,
wow.
Yeah, like in the Doctor Who, I think 50th anniversary, where the 10th Doctor and the 12th and the 11th Doctor meet each other. They meet forgotten version of the Doctor who's called the War Doctor, and it's just damn, like it's just you see there's a story right there. I mean, if you watch that 50th anniversary, it's like it brings like all the Doctor Who stories together in a sense, and all versions of the Doctor come to save his home planet. It's just wow,
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds good. I mean, it's one of those shows like I've always meant to sit down and watch. But like I said, I'm bad about starting to watch stuff. Like, oh god, like I don't know, like a lot of it's not even like anything personal against the TV show. Like I was really enjoying The Boys, but I just like.
Oh, I heard The Boys is good.
I got halfway through season 2 and I couldn't, and I stopped watching it, and now it's been like a couple months, so I forget what happened in the last episode. So like I know if I want to finish watching it, I'm gonna have to rewatch the last couple episodes. So. I don't know, it's almost like there's too much good TV nowadays, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good TV, I mean, like, I heard also, too, that they're going to do several Walking Dead spin-offs. You got Superman and Lois coming up, you got The Flash, Supergirl's on its last season, but then there's going to be more, I heard they're going to do a show based on Naomi. Yeah, so the Arrowverse is here to stay, obviously. So there's going to still be some shows coming up.
My stepkids are really into those shows. I've never sat down and watched them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Arrowverse.
Oh, yeah, the Arrowverse is awesome. And, like, especially with the crossovers that they've done with several of the shows, like with Green Arrow, Arrow, and then, like, Legends of Tomorrow. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like, that was, like, another one that was, I haven't seen too much of that, but I heard that one was pretty good. And then I've been watching WandaVision. WandaVision, now that one's a really good show.
Yeah, I've watched the first two or three episodes. I love the style. They got the Dick Van Dyke thing in the first 2 episodes perfect. Then they got, like, I don't know specifically what they were parodying. Kind of seemed like Good Times or something like that from like the 70s. Yeah, it's a good show.
Yeah.
I'm not caught up with that either, though. Like I said, I'm so bad at watching. I need to like make a schedule for myself or something.
Yeah, right, like a watch schedule or some stuff like that. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy that that's what it's come to? There's so much TV. I actually have to like keep up a schedule.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just because I think it's just the world we live in too. Like everything's just like,
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a good thing though too, because it's like we have everything at our fingertips right now.
It is a good thing. I mean, I know. I mean, you can get overwhelmed by it sometimes. I guess that's the negative side to it. Because I feel like every time I talk to one of my friends, they're like, "Oh yeah, by the way, did you see this TV show?" And I'm like, oh god, when am I gonna find the time?
Right? Like, I guess, like, the weekends are probably, like, the best time, you know what I mean? But it's, like, even then, like, the weekends, you just don't want to do anything but just, like, you know... I'm the same, you know, I'm like that, you know, at least for me, it's like, I just, you know... you know...
Yeah, I mean, I listen to so many podcasts and YouTube channels and Twitch channels just because I can do that while I work.
Yeah.
I can't really concentrate on a TV show, but I can concentrate on a podcast.
What kind of podcast do you like listening to?
I listen to a lot of comic book podcasts and YouTube channels.
This one podcast I listen to is the I believe it's called the Hero Lounge, or the forget. I mean, you can probably look it up. Let's see, because, like, yeah, it's like by Enosh Fett is his name. Like, it's a yeah, you know, Enosh Fett, and like it's really cool, you know.
What's it called?
Let me see. I believe it's called the. I want to say it's called the Superhero Lounge. Let me see. Come on, Twitter, don't be. Why can I find it? It's usually by like it's by like this podcaster by the name of Enosh Fett, and if I look up his name, the Point Dexter Lounge, that's what it is. Now I remember. Okay. But it is a funny podcast, and just talks about like all things geek and comic books, and you know, they even make fun of this one podcaster by the name of, I don't know if you've heard of him, but you might have heard of him. His name is Mike Zero, and he always talks about fake news involving Star Wars, and saying stuff like, you know, for instance, they're going to reboot the new trilogy. Get ready. Like, that's what it says in his title. Like, they're going to reboot the whole Star Wars trilogy. He's like, according to my sources from Lucasfilm, they're saying that they're going to remake the new trilogy, and that they're going to fire Kathleen Kennedy and make George Lucas into the president of Lucasfilm. And that is like, what, you know? Basically. He's a troll, yeah. And it's like, you know, at first I believed him. I was like, oh, crap. Like, this is good, because obviously, you know, I mean, you know, it's not that I don't like Kathleen Kennedy, though, but I felt like, you know, with her, she's kind of like, you know, warped Star Wars in a sense and not made it into Star Wars. So to the casual, you know, to like a diehard Star Wars fan, I would say, to a diehard Star Wars fan, that's music to anyone's ears to hear that Kathleen Kennedy is no longer going to be president. But the thing is, you know, this guy says all that, but then lo and behold, you see Kathleen Kennedy at the investors meeting. You're like, well, wait a minute, I thought she was going to be let go. And it's like, actually, you know, no, she's still president of Lucasfilm, and no one mentioned anything about, like, her being let go. Or he even said that, oh, they're going to have Brie Larson play in Star Wars as a Jedi. And it's like, that wasn't mentioned in the Disney investors meeting, for instance. It's like... and this guy on the Point Dexter's Lounge makes fun of him. He does a parody video of him just, you know... this is funny.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. I mean, I'm not super crazy about the newer Star Wars movies, but on the other hand, if you gave me her job, I would have no clue what to do. Like,
right? Like, you know, you don't know
what do with Star Wars that's not going to piss somebody off.
Well, what? Yeah, because, you know, you have all sorts of fans, you know, and like, for me, it's like, you know, I mean, I feel like almost any diehard Star Wars fan, you know, I mean, you can agree with me or not agree with me, especially, any listener can agree with me or not agree with me. I feel like any Star Wars fan would think that, just follow the expanded universe, bring Mara Jade back, or for instance, and I would love to have Mara Jade back. Mara Jade was actually one of my favorite expanded universe characters next to Koran Horn.
I'm going to be honest with you, I've never read any of those novels. I've read some of the comic books, but...
the novels are good.
I'm definitely a neophyte when it comes to, like, the expanded universe of Star Wars.
Oh, I mean, the expanded universe, it's just, the comics are good, like, this expanded universe in general is just good, whether you read the comics, read the, the books, or played the video games, even, like, I felt like, I just felt like, as like any casual Star Wars fan, it would have been cool to have the expanded universe, just on the big screen, but then... lo and behold, it's like this new trilogy comes out, which, don't get me wrong, it looks awesome, but, you don't see these characters that you've grown up with, and you're like, what the heck? And, I can understand, like, some feelings of the fans, too, because that was our childhood, Like, I grew up, reading about the Solo twins, Jason and Jaina, and Anakin Solo. I grew up, playing the Dark Forces games with Kyle Katarn, or, Shadows of the Empire with Dash Rendar, right. And seeing Mara Jade, in, both the comics and the novels. But then, Disney comes out with this, other version of Star Wars, which I feel like is, to me, like Earth 2 of Star Wars, how you have Earth 1, Earth 2 DC, And, like, I felt like, if I was to run Star Wars, I probably wouldn't know what to do, though, but I would say, like, maybe for me, it's like, I would have, like, made it to the point where they treat it like The Walking Dead, where you got the comic book version of The Walking Dead, and then you have, like, the other version of The Walking Dead, or they could have treated it like DC, like, you know what, let's split the universes. This is Universe 1, Universe 2. Like, because, you have, like, the different versions of the characters, like, Earth 1 Superman is like this young dude, whereas Earth 2 Superman's like a much older and wiser Superman, for instance.
I think The Walking Dead is a perfect example of something where just because it's different doesn't necessarily mean it's bad.
Exactly. People are gonna, I feel like with that, like, it caters to casual fans, or people who just don't read the comics, and there's always that too. Like, that's even with the Arrowverse. I have a buddy of mine who, I also do a podcast with, the DC Comic Geeks Nation podcast, and he told me, like, a lot of times he doesn't read any of the comics. He just likes to watch the show, and that's actually the premise of his whole, podcast is to, it's for fans who don't necessarily read the comics, but are fans of the show. And, sometimes, that's okay. You need that's actually a way to cater to certain fans, because not everyone's going to read the comic. Just like, with Star Wars, I feel like not everyone's going to know about the expanded universe. And I don't know if that... Go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish.
I don't know if that was like their way of, like, gaining more fans, because they probably felt like the fans, they're not going to read the, the expanding universe. And funny enough, even Kathleen Kennedy did say that, what, there's not a whole lot of material to, create this universe, when in fact you got the expanding universe. It's like, hello kiddo, you got like a whole crap load of, like, material that you can derive from. Now, I'm not saying you have to make it exactly like the expanded universe, but you could pull some elements from it, just like what Dave Filoni did when he was making The Mandalorian and the Clone Wars, and also Star Wars Rebels. Like, he brought back Grand Admiral Thrawn, who is a real, he's a real major Star Wars villain, like one of the most deadliest, and coolest, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think at this point where we've got all this, we've got 100 different versions of every story, it gets to the point where you just kind of have to read the stuff that you enjoy, read or watch the stuff that you enjoy, and kind of just ignore the stuff that you don't like. Because if they keep making Star Wars movies, eventually there's going to be one that you don't like.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we've already seen that with like, I feel like with the Last Jedi in a sense.
So yeah, I mean, it's the same way with comic books. I mean, that's what's kind of nice about comic books, where it's like, you know, one writer will write 20, 30 issues of a comic book, and then they'll move on to the next one. So, if you don't care for whatever this writer is doing, maybe just don't read that comic book for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Have a different writer on eventually. But yeah, and I mean, this idea that, oh, because I didn't like the latest version of Star Wars, that's ruining my childhood or whatever. We need to get out of that mentality for sure.
There's that too.
No movie or TV show should ruin your childhood.
Oh no. Wow, so we touched up on a lot of stuff.
I feel like we've talked about almost everything involving comic books or movies or TV.
Yeah. Yeah, so pretty much Beowulf Kickstarter, it comes out tomorrow, correct?
Yeah. It's gonna be on about 7 tomorrow in the evening. It's gonna launch.
Man, I'm looking forward to it, and yeah, just this whole story and all that with Beowulf, and yeah, and like, what are the perks in your Kickstarter?
We're gonna have stickers. We're gonna have a lot of pinups. If some of the stretch goals are, we might do trading cards, and we might do a poster.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Can you put a link? If I send you a link to the Kickstarter, can you put that like somewhere in the message board or something, or in the comments?
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I have to find the link. You want me to just send it to you? Is there a screen on here that I can send? Oh, chat.
Yeah, chat should pop up.
There you go.
Okay, let's see if I got it. Oh, there it is. Alright, this is a Kickstarter link. Yep, so I'll go ahead and put that on there, and I'll definitely, I post this video up to YouTube. I'll definitely put it on the, I'll put it underneath the comment section, and then also, especially when I post the episode on my Anchor and my Spotify, I'll put it on there as well, so that way it's for everyone to see. So yep, there's the Kickstarter, folks. Just click on that link if you want to support this comic. It has many perks. And yeah, I'm really excited about this comic. Beowulf, I mean, it'd be like reading that same book I did in high school, but only this time told in a modern, sort of twist.
Oh, I think it'll be more fun than the original text.
And I kind of wonder too, like, will we meet Grendel or Grendel's mother or some form of them?
So not in this 6-issue story arc, but eventually we will.
And who knows, maybe they might, still be villainous in some way, or maybe they might be like, good versions of themselves. I mean, I don't know. I mean, or maybe Hazel might be Grendel's mother. I don't know. Like some kind of cool twist.
Exactly.
Well, that's gonna wrap it up for this. Do you have any final thoughts, Grant?
This was a lot of fun. I'd be up for doing this again sometime.
Totally, man.
And if you want to do my newsletter, I'll send you some questions.
Sounds cool, man. Well, and where can we follow you on social media?
So mostly on Instagram, it's at GW Lankard. Or you can actually go on Facebook, Monarch Monarch Presents Beowulf is the official Facebook page of the comic.
Awesome, man.
Oh, and also if you want to go to monarchpublishing.net, there's a free sample of the comic book. I think I gave you like 7, maybe 8 pages. So it's a pretty sizable sample.
All right, cool, man. Well, thank you for being on the show. We hope to have you back soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, it's my pleasure, man. And, you know, hopefully we can have you back again. And thank you so much, and you have a good rest of your day.
This was a fun little chat. Thank you.
You're welcome, man. You too.